Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Have fun
Great,
all.
thank you. Okay.
I do. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so the adventures with technology, very interesting. So what we'd like to do now is just to get some feedback that came out of from the conversations in the small groups. So do we want the team members who are in the groups, or if there's group members who want to share a highlight or something that came out of their small group discussions with the large group? Let's do it. Anybody?
Jude, would you want to? Oh, would you want to be assigned speaker for group number 1? I can help in too.
Is it group number 1?
Yes, that was us. That was group number 1.
That's me.
That's you.
Yeah, do you want to talk? Do you want to start and I can join in?
Sure. Yeah, so we had Tia, who is also on here, who I don't think has been able to join us again, but she was talking, she works in Kentucky. She's a community mobilizer. And so she's talking about ways in which her organization and her, within the hierarchy and within the work that they do, how they avoid working through questions of conflict. And so we were just kind of making the point of how important understanding conflict is to being able to accomplish anything between parties, especially at a community mobilization level where everybody has many, many different experiences with each other. Also, of course, right now, so I'm speaking a little bit for her, Jude, if that's okay, and then maybe you can close this out.
That's fine. I'm quite happy with that.
So, of course, a lot of the issues there also in terms of policing, which of course are happening across the United States and with so many allies across the world, looking at that question of external and internal, right? Internal peace drivers. So who brings about peace? How can you mobilize actions for peace? How can we understand the role of external actors? How can we understand the requirement for the internal actors as well? And then one of the things that I particularly wanted to add was that Tia and Jude is going to speak to the perspective of somebody who is a peace builder, who works in conflict resolution, excuse me, versus those of us who might shy away from it, thinking that we don't quite have the right training. And I do love when things are simple at the end of the day. And I'm, again, not belittling any kind of need to have training for mediation and negotiation and all the different tools that are required. But I do see, and I'm curious as to whether people agree, that there are a lot of tools that ABCD utilizes that can be thought about through a peace building lens, for example. Appreciative interviewing, the listening skills, positive history kind of creation, alignment of resources, priorities, all of these different tools that ABCD incorporates towards community development that are really critical to, and I'm sure already incorporated into a lot of conflict resolution frameworks. So that was just a question to everybody. And then I will leave the expert to wrap us up.
Yeah, I work for Restorative Gloucestershire. We're based obviously in the UK, and we're trained in restorative justice, facilitation, and community mediation, workplace mediation. What else do we do? We're trained in sensitive and complex cases, harmful sexual behaviour, domestic violence. So we do quite a range of cases. And I was trained in asset-based community development in 2014. That's where I met Richard Holmes and Cormac Russell years ago. And then I became a facilitator for Restorative Gloucestershire in 2017, I'd say. So we do work in conflicts. We work in kind of high-level murder cases, offender, victim. And we facilitate to repair the harm for the victim. But as I see, there's a continuum of asset-based community development, restorative practice to restorative justice, the end to the conflict. And what we've got a community practice working group we set up at Restorative Gloucestershire. And what we'd like to see, kind of multi-agency and working with community sector, is to actually support communities to resolve their own issues. And it's kind of in my head, how do we do that? is doing with that community, and like training community facilitators. So it's kind of one of the things we're thinking about. So at the present, we've got about 45 active cases. So we've still been working on those cases virtually, online, or we're doing social distance face-to-face in England. So we're kind of doing that. So I get stuck now if you can't ask me any questions about, but as I see where it's based is a community resolving their own issues themselves. And obviously it does end up a conflict, but you can actually repair harm when you're working with people. That's not explained it very well, is it? But
Very great.
Good, thank you.
That's it for our group. If another group wants to give some insights.
Another group that likes to.
Sure. I mean, we were group 2. I unfortunately did not participate much in group 2 because I was late getting into the group and then my phone overheated and died. So I think if someone else from group 2 wants to talk a little bit about the conversation.
Is there somebody here from group 2? Our numbers have kind of shrunk, so.
I wonder if
Myra, perhaps?
well, Myra could take a step away. I mean, Lisa, I think was. Okay, if Lisa maybe still listening in, there's a so I mean, so it was the bit that I was able to participate in before my phone shut down. Is that we were talking about like when does change start and who gets to start change and drive change, and we talked about if you take kind of an ABCD approach to peace building, the people who start change, you know, you build on momentum, you build on connections, you build on things that are already there, and you kind of wait for these opportune moments to start to really kind of move into action, which is something that Peacebuilding really did. So you can't have an artificial timeline. You can't say we're going to do this now and that's going to lead to this then. You know, you can't put a timeline on peace. You can't projectize peace. But an ABCD approach to peace really looks for a kind of organic, opportune moments that are built on existing connections in a community.
Thanks. I'm just being mindful of time, and I think we need to let this link go by about 5 to the hour. So is there somebody who can give a quick snap of group 3? I don't know if there's somebody from group 3 here.
I am from group 3, and
Awesome.
Gord was part of this group as well. And we have 3 other members. Chris
Feels like Survivor.
will be in yeah. Well, yeah, we have 4 of us. We were
Okay, awesome.
that's 3 of us. Yeah. So basically, we were looking at the actors of this asset-based peace building process. And what we've seen is that the community members were the key actors in this process. But what Chris shared with us is that at the beginning of the process, they were passive residents. They were passive members of the community, and then progressively started to realize that they need to be part of this process. They need to be part of the change we want to see. And that's where, Wabi comes in and emphasize about the fact that they started with one community, and this community sort of served as a multiplying effect to other communities to follow the same lead, the same process of getting into, getting together and build a momentum for peace. And that's related to another comment I think made by Gord that says sometimes you can be in a community where you have one or a small group of leaders, and then when they realize that there's a bigger leadership coming in that is made of engaged citizens, engaged community members, then they step them back, getting the leadership to the bigger group, because at some point they need to recognize that there's something bigger than themselves that's happening. And in the case of Cité Soleil, that's exactly what happened when all the groups started to take example from others and follow the leadership of others and come together as a whole to redefine the way they are seeing their community and they are engaging with each other. I think there was another example from Chris. I couldn't hear well, Gord, so maybe a few seconds on that would be appreciated.
I mean, I just reflecting on that conversation. I mean, I think the ABCD process itself tends to be about appreciating what others contribute, and in doing so, when you start to see other people in a different light, it also leads to collective action, and collective action builds agency. That leads to trust being built, leadership being built, and it's a kind of power that's built. That's an alternative power to the kind of power that you're often facing in a conflict situation, and that sometimes leaves the group in a slightly different place after a bit of time. Without consciously focusing on peace building, they're actually building a lot of the tools that will allow them to negotiate conflict in different ways. So it's more of an unconscious part of the ABCD process, but it dovetails very nicely with a lot of the sort of peace building theory and practice, in my view.
Yeah. Okay, so I was in group 4. I'm wondering if there's somebody else who is in that group. I know there's Patrick, Barbara, and Pauline are here. Do you have any kind of, we were just kind of talking about the results and the results of it, and thinking about how taking an asset-based approach and building from the community addresses can address some of the issues that are existing, but also look at more sustainable ways of addressing the cracks in the relationships by building that process, kind of what you were talking about, Gord, but also how that might be more sustainable and have longevity. Anybody else from the group want to speak or add to that? Another comment that came up that Barbara made too was that with COVID-19 happening right now and how it is exacerbating some of the existing tensions and conflicts in communities, and so incorporating and looking at bringing in conflict resolution and peace building into projects right now might be really critical and crucial to making things happen in this particular moment that might not have been so so prominent before COVID.
Could I add just something really small? Just one of the things that really struck me from the video and from my exposure to Sole Leve is this idea of reclaiming a practice and a way of doing things from the rural areas, in this case, Combit. To me, that's a very sustainable kind of approach too. It's really about shifting mindsets, as Roby talks about, and about allowing people to see, look, this kind of practice can be adapted to this kind of circumstance, and it's a way of being. It's a way of seeing others and of reciprocity that can work in different ways. And there's something really magical, in my view, about looking and appreciating assets that may not be seen as assets in the sort of tangible way, but they're these practices that come from, in many cases, rural areas adapted to urban neighborhoods can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and I think something else to consider as well is that communities, like you're talking about reclaiming space, but also communities reclaiming and recognizing their own assets in regards to conflict resolution, peace building practice, that there are all these local capacities for peace out there, and how do we recognize those to bring them into our development practice?
Absolutely.
And also just to add something that goes to what from my own perspective and from what I've heard a lot of other perspectives is people's hesitance to think about peace building as something that they are doing in a direct way. And I think, just to simplify it, you can think about, if we recognize conflict as everywhere, we also can recognize that peace building is everywhere. So
Yeah.
It's some aspect of saying, if I work in peace building, then I can do harm if I don't do it correctly. If I work in economic development, then I can do harm if I don't do it correctly. Whereas we're much more well-versed in that principled kind of direction towards supporting and not leading the kind of economic development that we're all working in. With peace building, we're less comfortable. We're saying we're not 100% sure exactly if we do this so directly, can we have pitfalls? And I think that is a misunderstanding and something that could be demystified to help people recognize the way that they can contribute with principles that they understand really clearly on ABCD and that also are not as fraught as you might think, perhaps.
Like deliberately trying to be more inclusive, focusing on building social capital as an end rather than a means,
Exactly.
can all lead to these same outcomes in my view.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and also just something that kind of struck us too was that people, ABCD practitioners, are doing peace building and conflict transformation work. They're just not naming it as such.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a matter of the lens or the name that you're giving your work. So what in interest of time and that we need to kind of let this Zoom link go on to the next session, we want to take a group photo. And so for those people who are comfortable, if you want to show your face, and then we somebody from our group will take a group photo of everybody. And
I can do that if you want.
Can you do that, Lucia?
Sure, of course.
I want to see Lisa on her couch.
Oh, that was Lisa. Come on, Lisa. Show your face.
There she is.
Okay, everybody.
Awesome.
I think we're there. All right,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone, for participating and for coming back.
Thank you so much.